Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sheri Hoyte, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Sheri, Whitaker, Budziak, and Kevin Ordon joins us today to talk about their book, RUG, How to Move What You're Tripping Over and Land with Heart. It's both a leadership framework and a deeply personal story about what happens when disruption hits. Built around the heart-powered leadership method, it challenges leaders to stop pretending the rug isn't there and finally move what's been tripping them up. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the authors. Sheri Whitaker Budziak is founder and CEO of OrgSource, where she has spent 2 decades helping more than 350 organizations align people, process, technology, and purpose. A keynote speaker, a podcast host, and co-founder of the .org community, she is also the co-author of the Association 4.0 book series. Kevin Ordonez is president and managing director of digital strategy at OrgSource, bringing more than 20 years of experience helping associations envision and execute their digital futures. He is co-founder of the .org community and co-author of the Association 4.0 book series. And you can learn more about the authors and their work at rugthebook.com and orgsource.com. Well, hi guys. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Hi, Sheri. Good to talk with you today. I'm excited about this.
Hi, Sheri. How you doing? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheri, nice to have you back. Kevin, nice to meet you. Tell us about your new book, RUG, How to Move What You're Tripping Over and Lead with Heart. What's it about? And what was the inspiration behind writing it?
Sure. So RUG is really about what we keep stepping over in leadership and in life until it finally just trips us up. So it's really about those hidden patterns, avoided conversations, outdated systems, and personal pain points that stay in place because they feel familiar. That inspiration came really both from my personal life and our consulting work. I had lost my husband suddenly and experienced a disruption in really the deepest possible way. And when Kevin and I were reflecting back on that, we realized that some of the same lessons that helped organizations move through change also can help people with healing, help them rebuild and really rise out of that disruption. And that really became the heart of the book. But how the RUG title came about was a little more fun than that. So about 10 years ago, we were at a client site, and outside of that conference room, there was this ugly, worn out rug in the hallway, and people were tripping over it like every day, but no one would move it. And so when I finally asked why, someone said to me, well, Sheri, we need to ask the CEO. And I was like, what? And that really stuck with me. So it became kind of this metaphor for all the things that leaders and teams keep stepping over every day, but they're afraid to move it because it becomes familiar. And that was the moment, like the whole idea of everything that kind of I had lived through and the kind of our stories and that rug like clicked for us, and it became a book.
That has got to be one of the best visuals I have heard in a long time. I mean, it's a great hook. In real life, what are some of the most common rugs people or leaders keep stepping over until they finally trip over them?
Sure. So some of the most common rugs are really some of the simple things, those meetings that keep happening that nobody needs, or those processes that no one trusts, but we keep doing it that way, or when there's tension, but nobody wants to name it. And that could be, the burnout that everybody pretends isn't happening, right? So there's that. And then also leaders, I think, step over some emotional rugs. I think as leaders, sometimes we're dealing with grief or fear or, pressure. And there's that pressure to feel like you have to be strong all the time. And that can, kind of become a rug. But I'll let Kevin add to that.
Yeah, sure. And, from the organization perspective, it's those assumptions. And there are those familiar phrases, I think, we've all heard in different discussions, it's that's how we've always done it. Or, oh, we
Mm,
need the approval. Or let's not rock that boat at this time. And those phrases really represent culture rugs. They look very harmless until they're not. And then they start either costing us time, money, trust, or even stifle innovation.
yeah. It's so easy to fall into that habit, though. We don't want to be uncomfortable. It's hard to sit with stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've heard it described as not a typical leadership book. What do you want leaders to understand about the kind of leadership this book is really asking for?
What I really want leaders to understand is that this book is asking for really a more human approach to leadership, the kind that's honest and self aware and brave enough to deal with what's really going on instead of just stepping around it. So, you know, for so long, leadership has been about looking strong, holding it all together, pushing through. And we
Mm,
all tend to do that. We do that in our personal lives too, right? But sometimes, as Kevin said, that comes as a cost. And so this book is really asking leaders to slow down just enough to see the people behind the performance, including themselves. It's asking them to lead with empathy, with truth, and with courage. And I don't want to sound like, that's kind of a softer leadership, but it's really, I think, the leadership that's required right now. We're dealing with a lot of change, whether it's change of technology or things happening in the world, and really understanding that what's going on behind the scenes, I think, is really important for us to be really good leaders. Kevin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think, again, from the enterprise side or the organization side, that kind of leadership can change everything. Because when leaders stop performing control and command and start leading with their heart and honesty and trust, teams now start to respond quite differently. And you get more truth, you get more ownership, and a much more stronger culture at your organization.
yeah. I mean, that just makes sense, right? The world is different. It's different from when I was in the corporate world
Yeah.
not too long ago. And it's changing so fast. We need new tools. Now, you've built your framework around how to move what you're tripping over and lead with heart. Tell us a little bit about the heart framework. What does it stand for? Why did you build it this way? How did it all come together?
Sure. Well, first, we were trying to come up with a framework, and just another little backstory. I was born on Valentine's Day, and this was
Oh,
happening around a February timeframe. And we're like, if we call it the Heart framework, right? But it's so Heart stands for Humanize, Empower, Ascend, Reimagine, and Transform.
mm,
So Kevin and I built this in a way that after everything we had seen in our work and everything I had lived through personally, we realized leadership in disruptive times requires more than just pushing harder or having a plan. And it really starts with humanizing. And as I mentioned, seeing people and yourself honestly,
hmm
and then empowering them because people rise when they feel like they're being trusted. And then ascend is about choosing growth, even when it feels uncomfortable.
mm,
I went through a time where I used to public speak. And when I was going through hard times, I was like, I can't get up on a stage again. I can't do this. And had to kind of push myself, right, to make that next step, even when it's not comfortable. And then reimagining, where you stop asking, like, how do I get back to normal? And start asking what's possible now. And again, I think in this times, especially with AI and everything that's changing, people are having a hard time with that reimagining, right? It's all new. And instead of just saying, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, start thinking about how can I handle things differently? And then transform is what happens when you stop just surviving and actually become stronger through it. And that's why this heart framework matters to us so much. We didn't build it just from a theory, but we built it on real life that
Right.
somebody can actually just remember and take those steps through the process. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you to add to that.
Yeah, sure. So I think what makes H.E.A.R.T so powerful is that it works both for me personally and me as part of the organization.
Mm.
And it helps us leaders grow, but it also helps teams build cultures where ingredients of trust, innovation, and then transformation can actually make a big difference. So we believe that this framework can help everyone, if they're going through those personal challenges or organizational challenges, to help everyone grow and make it hold and make it stick.
Yeah. I want to jump back to that reimagine part because while you were talking and explaining it, that seemed like the biggest challenge to me because it's hard to think outside the box, you know? It's hard to unlearn something.
Yes.
So, what is the biggest challenge around reimagining something?
It's interesting, Sheri, because I do this talk as a keynote speaker, and I ask the audience out of the 5 things, what is hardest for them? And every single time, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to a group of doctors or a group of association professionals or a group of engineers, reimagining tends to be the hardest thing for them to do.
Yeah.
And so we go through, and the book takes you through some exercises. So in the book, at the end of each chapter, we talk about, it's kind of part story, part theory, and we talk about each of these topics. And reimagine, we have exercises where you say, okay, what if this is like a 5-star experience already? And how do we get it to 10-star? Right.
Mm.
And that's if you have an unlimited budget, unlimited resources, all the time in the world, what would that 10-star experience look like? And then going through the exercise of, okay, let's just pull it back and be realistic now. But that gets you kind of thinking outside of the box a little bit of, oh yeah, we can kind of reimagine. And I'll give you a story. This was interesting because I ran this at a workshop recently, and somebody told us they went through a similar exercise at their organization. And so they were having fun with it. And this was a medical society. And they said, what if we had a pickleball court at our exhibit floor? And today they have 2 pickleball courts on their exhibit hall floor, and they're both sponsored by industry.
I love it.
So yeah, that was bringing in like $20,000 into the organization. And who would have ever thought about having a pickleball court on the exhibit hall floor? I still can't believe it's happening. I've got to go see it because I'm like, really? So I think really kind of stepping outside of, that comfort zone and really taking the time to rethink how we're doing things. I think that's really hard for people. I mean, even ourselves. Recently, my assistant left the company, and my immediate reaction, and most people's would be, is to go hire somebody else to take her position, right?
Mm.
And my team, because we try to practice what we preach, well, they said, yes, and let's wait and let's see what we really need, because we needed to reimagine all of the things that she was doing, because there was a lot of administration going on. And because we took those 3 or 4 weeks to take a breath, rethink how we're doing the work, we have streamlined so many things in our company. But I think that's really hard for people to do.
Yeah. I love that. First of all, practicing what you preach. Kudos for that, because I mean, that right there just brings that authenticity to your book, your framework, your company. I love that. And you were able to save time and money, and going back to that, you were using that reimagination. And I think that, starting big with that, let's think about everything outrageous if money and time weren't an object, and then scale it back to the reality. That's easier because you can be outrageous. It's easy for us to be outrageous, but to be realistic, that's a great starting point. This is great. I'm learning so much.
Because it flips it, right? So it became fun. Like, just like I like talking about the rugs, because now we're not going into an organization saying, okay, what's your problem? What are you, what is stopping you from whatever? When you start saying, what's your rug? People are like, oh, that's a rug, or that's a rug, right? Like, it's in this safe, fun language. And it's the same thing with this 10-star experience. It's like you're having fun, but then ideas come out of that you go, wait, I can have a pickleball court on the exhibit floor. We just got to get waivers signed, and like we've got to be realistic about it, right? We've got to like make sure that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but they were able to do it, and that not only created a revenue for the organization, but it's memorable. Now that's a member experience at their annual meeting. I mean, there's so much that came out of it, but they would have never thought about that unless they went through that team exercise to really think and, be imaginative, right? And I think as adults, that's hard for us to do. Like we're getting up, we're doing the things every single day, and it's hard to like go, okay, how do I reimagine this?
Yeah. Especially when we already know everything, right?
That's right. That's right.
No matter the type of organization, are there certain kinds of rugs that are most common for people to trip over?
I would say that we get kind of stuck in routines, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes those routines feel like the job, and then that job becomes a culture. So those could just be things like there's something that we just don't talk about. Like we all know it's there. It's those things like that's happening in the parking lot when people leave the office and they're talking about, but they won't name in the meeting. I would just say that whether it's an issue of trust with leadership that people aren't being honest about, or there's a process problem. And a lot of times there's process problems in organizations that people just deal with it because that's just how it's always been.
Yeah.
And they avoid trying to fix it. But then those things become frustrations, and those frustrations becomes, well, now I don't want it to change because I'm afraid of it changing. Kevin, do you have any thoughts or additions to that?
Sometimes those conversations, we like to avoid things, right? Especially if they cause conflict or they're like taboo subjects. And so the more you avoid, then more of the things become normal. Like, oh, we don't talk about that. One of those unwritten rules or those cultures that people get indoctrinated with, and that's just what we do or what we don't do.
Yeah.
So sometimes, not talking about it, you don't want to disturb things or rock anything or create a situation where there could be potential conflict, because people want to come in and do their work and go home and hope they, made a difference. But if you're not challenging and you're not questioning, then things stay the same.
Yeah. And like you were talking about earlier, Kevin, too, there are consequences for that. And, what does that look like? Or what can that look like? Just putting things off and not changing. It's almost dismissive to me.
Yeah, it certainly can be dismissive. And when organizations say we have a great culture or we have a culture of innovation, but nothing else is changing, well, then they're really stifling that innovation. And, we talked about comfort zones, right? People don't necessarily like to get out of their comfort zones and do something a little different because, there's a process in place. Someone took care of it. Even like our own experience that Sheri mentioned with our assistant leaving, and we counted on her to do X, Y, and Z, and now we're like, oh no, what's going to happen? But if we took time to pause and say, hey, what if we do it differently? Or what if we consolidated a couple of systems or processes, or just review it? There's always some silver lining when either someone leaves or someone comes in or something's changed in your business. Everyone should take advantage of that pause and seek out that silver lining, or else things going to feel the same.
Now, when you see leaders confusing, leadership is often confused with control, and it's not the same. There's not control versus leadership. What shifts when they stop trying to control everything?
Yeah, that's a good one. I say when leaders say they want innovation, but they still need to have control or a say in every decision, or everything needs to be routed through them, that's where they confuse oversight with ownership, right? So real leadership is not about, being the bottleneck or saying it doesn't need to be routed through me. It's about multiplying that leadership in others and empowering them to make decisions and be leaders. And so when those type of leaders stop the white knuckling of everything, people tend to move faster. People tend to speak up more, and they take maybe smarter risks. They're not taking not just smart risks, but they're wanting to step up to the plate, take those smarter risks when they're not trying to control everything.
Yeah. And Sheri, I would add to that because since I told the story about reimagining even our own operations,
Mm.
we have somebody on our team that does consulting work, and that's what she does for organizations. She helps them reimagine processes,
Oh.
and she does a great job. And I had to say very specifically to her, you're in charge of us. Like, I don't care that I have the CEO title and you're asking us what we think, but you know this so well and you know the systems and you have your hands in the processes. You tell us. And then I have a tendency to say, how long is this going to take? And this be done tomorrow. Like, and I'm like, and now you have to tell us. And it's been a little bit of a back and forth because we have a Monday call and she's like, okay, this, and what do you guys want to do? And we're like, no, what do you think we should do? And that just helps, as Kevin said, people be able to speak up more. You know, it gave her authority to make decisions to keep moving those projects forward. And simple things like we moved our email marketing system to another system and we're moving our social media to another system. And she was able to say, okay, these are the things that are going to be more efficient for not only how we use the systems, but how we use our team, because we gave her the opportunity to reimagine it. If we didn't do that, and if I didn't take that pause, which was hard for me to do too as a leader, like, let's be honest,
Yeah.
but if we didn't, we wouldn't have moved the needle. And I feel like we're moving the needle so much more now.
Right.
So those, I think, are things that leaders really need to stop and try to do. And I know that sometimes that's uncomfortable, but just taking those little steps can really create progress. And then, as Kevin said, you know, that is when innovation happens, and that's when change happens.
Right. Now, throughout the book, you include like rug reflections and the practice and micro moves and practical actions that people can take after they've read the book or while they're reading the book, or, you know, I mean, keep the book on your desk, you know? And
Yes.
what's a micro move that a listener can try that really creates real traction for companies?
Yeah. So it's always been important for us, whether if we're doing consulting work or even with the book, to give people very practical, easy things that they can do that helps move the needle just a little bit. So that's why we call them micro moves. And as you know, the book is part story, part workbook. As you said, leave it on your desk so then you can refer back to it. But I would say ask one person, what's something that we keep stepping over that isn't working anymore?
Mm.
So have them sit with it for, even if it's 30 seconds, just to really think, or 60 seconds, and wait to hear what that real answer is, because that one question can unlock more than a full day strategy session. Everybody knows what it is, but a lot of times we just don't reflect on it or we don't say it out loud.
Right. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And you've mentioned throughout the interview honesty. And for me, what I remember back in my corporate days is like honesty versus political correctness. You know, that is a challenge. What does a leader need to do to make it feel safe for people to tell the truth?
Yeah, so that's where you need to really create that safe space. And how do we do that, right? So the first thing is we need to stop punishing truth with defensiveness, right? And then
Mm.
second, reward that candor early on and not just after the fact. And third, maybe model it after yourself, you know, admit when you miss something, you know, and say that, you know, we're learning. And safety is not created by saying, oh, my door is always open. You always hear, yeah, my door is always open for a conversation. Well, you know, that safety is really created when people see that truth, and that truth leads to clarity and not consequences. So it all goes back to more, you know, practicing what you preach. And when you say your door is open, that's great, but practice it yourself. Admit you missed something, or, yep, we're trying to figure out these best practices, and just repeat that and create that safe environment so you can have those honest discussions.
That's a good point, too, because I think you have to feel safe to make these mistakes, too. Not necessarily a mistake, but that's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how things
Right.
happen. That's how change happens.
I'll add, Sheri, to that. You know, as Kevin was talking, I was thinking about, like, even with our consulting work, people can name their rug. They can find their problem, and sometimes that's a symptom of something else, right? So as a leader, asking those clarifying questions without judging makes people feel safe. So they may think the issue is X, but without solving the problem, just asking more questions and creating that safe place of conversation about the rug or the issue creates trust. So that takes some practice because it also takes time to ask those clarifying questions, right? Instead of just jump into the conclusion.
Yeah.
So I would add that for people to think about.
Yeah.
And that can be in your personal life too. I mean, again, whether it's your kids or whatever, they come in, there's a problem, you want to solve it, but asking those clarifying questions and not by saying, did you think about this? But, well, why did that happen? Or why do you think that? Or, you know, those types of things just really opens up dialogues to give people room to feel that they can talk about their rugs in a safe environment.
So when someone actually starts moving these rugs, it's hard. It can, kind of shake up the whole organization. What are the signs that you're on the right track, even if it does feel a little bit messy?
Yeah, it certainly would feel messy, especially early on when you're moving your first couple of rugs. But you're on the right track when people start asking those better questions and start following your lead, right? They start to speak up sooner. They take ownership and then they start challenging assumptions in a very respectful way. So it may feel messier, but it should also feel a little smoother because, again, silence is being replaced now by this honesty in the safe place that we have created. So this is not really a dysfunction. That's really movement.
Right. It can feel like dysfunction at first, though, because
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly new things do feel dysfunctional or that's getting out of your comfort zone. But when you're doing it right and when people start responding with those better questions and challenging certain things in that respectful manner, then you're making progress. Then you can leverage that progress and start moving those heavier rugs that may be a bigger mess to begin with. But again, it's not a dysfunction. It's really a movement for the organization.
Yeah. Tell us about your website and what you all do. Like, how can readers or listeners learn more about what you do for organizations?
Sure. So we have two websites. One is called rugthebook.com, where they can find information about our workshops of the book, those types of things. And then our consulting website is www.orgsource, ORGSOURCE. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, and it's /Sheri B, but Sheri Whitaker Budziak. And I have a weekly heart-powered leadership newsletter that goes out every Friday. So your listeners can subscribe to that if they want to do more of a deeper dive around the concept of heart-powered leadership.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Now, I wanted to close with a challenge, if you'd let me. If you could dare leaders to move one specific rug this week, what would you tell them to face head on? What's number one?
So leaders, they already know what's draining energy, usually. They already know what's causing trust issues, and they already know the conversations that they've been avoiding. So I say, really challenge yourself to stop just stepping around it and use this rug concept of, let's name what we're tripping over. Let's see what's underneath it. I always say rugs can be safe or create safety because they're like hiding things, right? They're hiding that ugly crack on the floor or, something that somebody swept under there that we forgot about. So, have that fun conversation and let's face it and then say, what's the one little thing we can do? Because when you try to move things abruptly, then you get resistance from teams because the rug isn't the story. Like how we move it is the story. Like how we move in these little steps and little micro moves can really move the needle. And I've seen leaders do this really well over my career. And I've seen the ones that they have disruption, but then they're ripping up the rug and throwing it in the closet and everybody's freaked out, right? So, just have the conversation, stop stepping around it, and just pick one little thing and just try it and pick something that doesn't seem hard for the team. So
Yeah.
Kevin, I'll let you close.
Yeah, sure. I'll close with this. So, leadership's not defined by how rarely you fall. It's defined by how willingly you rise and how many people rise because you did.
Yeah. Perfect. Leading by example. Sheri, Kevin, is there anything else you wanted to add today?
Yeah, I'll say, Sheri, we'll just tell everybody to take those rugs, roll them up, and move them out.
Yeah. Perfect.
This was fun. We really appreciate being on the podcast with you, and pleasure having you interview us once again, and just really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, Sheri, very much.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my conversation with Sheri Whitaker Budziak and Kevin Ordonez, authors of RUG, How to Move What You're Tripping Over and Lead with Heart. You can learn more about the authors and their work at rugthebook.com and orgsource.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.